There's something nobody tells you about the moments that break you. They don't announce themselves as divine appointments. They feel like betrayals, failures, losses, like everything is going wrong at the worst possible time. When Watchman Nee sat in that prison cell for 2 decades, stripped of his platform and isolated from the church he'd poured his life into, it looked like a tragic waste. A brilliant mind silenced, a powerful voice muted, God's work seemingly destroyed by human cruelty. But here's what he discovered in that darkness. God wasn't punishing him. God was reconstituting him, taking apart everything he'd built on his natural abilities and replacing it with something infinitely more valuable. Christ himself living through a completely broken vessel. Most of us pray the wrong prayers when pressure hits. We ask God to fix the situation, restore what we lost, make things go back to normal. We treat suffering like an interruption to God's plan, instead of recognizing it as the plan itself. Watchman Nee learned the hard way that God doesn't improve your old life, he terminates it. Not because he's cruel, but because your natural life, no matter how consecrated or religious it becomes, can never transmit Christ's life to others. That requires an actual death and an actual resurrection, and the crushing circumstance you're facing right now. It's not evidence that God abandoned you. It's proof that he loves you too much to leave you trapped in a life that looks successful but remains spiritually powerless. What you're about to discover will completely change how you see your worst moments. There is a technical term in Watchman Nee's writings that most believers completely misunderstand: the veil of the flesh. He is not talking about sin. He is not referring to bad behavior or moral failure. He is describing something far more dangerous: the natural human life, even at its best, even when consecrated to God, functions as an impenetrable barrier that blocks the spirit from expressing Christ. You can be morally upright, theologically correct, actively serving, and still have this veil completely intact. And here is what makes this terrifying: you will not know it. The veil does not feel like an obstruction. It feels like you, your personality, your strengths, your way of processing life, your natural reactions. These are not neutral tools God can simply redirect. They are the veil itself. Consider what happens when someone offends you publicly. Your immediate reaction, whether you defend yourself eloquently or withdraw in wounded silence, reveals which life is operating. The defended ego, the injured pride, the need to be understood, the demand for justice. These are not sins to confess. They are manifestations of the unreconstituted soul still governing your responses. Watchman Nee discovered during his imprisonment that circumstances do not create these reactions. They merely expose what was already there. The guards who mocked him, the comrades who betrayed him, the years of silence when he could have been preaching. None of this produced anything in him. It only revealed what his decades of successful ministry had effectively concealed: how much of his service still originated from the natural man rather than from Christ himself. This is where reconstitution differs fundamentally from reformation. Reformation tries to improve your reactions, respond with kindness instead of anger, choose patience over frustration, practice humility instead of pride. But improved reactions still originate from the same source: you. Reconstitution is God systematically exposing every area where the natural life still dominates, then applying precisely calibrated pressure until that specific manifestation of self-life dies, not improves, not gets redirected, dies. And the pressure he uses is never random. It targets your exact configuration of strength. If you derive identity from being competent, he arranges unsolvable problems. If you find security in relationships, he allows strategic abandonments. If you trust your discernment, he permits situations where your wisdom produces catastrophic results. The phrase Watchman Nee used that cuts through all religious pretense is this: the issue is not whether you can control your temper, but whether you still have a temper to control. This distinction demolishes our entire framework of spiritual growth. We measure progress by how well we manage our natural tendencies. God measures progress by how dead those tendencies have become. You can control your tongue through discipline, but the source of words, whether they emerge from natural wisdom or from the Spirit, remains unchanged. You can manage your emotions through techniques, but the soul generating those emotions continues operating. You can modify behavior through willpower, but the self-life producing that behavior stays intact, merely redirected toward more acceptable expressions. Your worst circumstance is not teaching you patience. It is not building your character. It is not developing your faith. These are all soul-level improvements that leave the fundamental problem untouched. What your worst circumstance is actually doing, if you stop resisting long enough to let it work, is showing you with brutal clarity where the veil of your flesh still blocks the Spirit. That financial collapse that exposed your anxiety, that betrayal that revealed your need for validation, that sickness that uncovered your demand for control, that failure that displayed your dependence on achievement. These are not lessons about managing life better. They are death sentences against specific manifestations of the natural life that must be terminated before Christ can express himself through you in that area. Watchman Nee made an observation that most commentators ignore because it is too uncomfortable. The more gifted you are naturally, the more extensive your breaking must be. Natural giftedness, intelligence, charisma, emotional strength, organizational ability, even spiritual insight, presents a unique problem. These gifts accomplish things, they produce results, they help people, and this effectiveness becomes the greatest obstacle to spiritual reality. Why? Because as long as your natural gifts can achieve ministry outcomes, you will never be forced to discover what happens when Christ himself does the work through a broken vessel. The tragedy is that you can build an entire ministry, help thousands of people, and maintain an impressive reputation while the Spirit within you remains locked behind the veil of your natural abilities. The technical process Watchman Nee describes involves 3 specific phases, and most believers abort the process during phase 1. First comes the exposure. Circumstances reveal a specific area where natural life dominates. You become aware that your response originated from soul rather than spirit. Second comes the persistence. God does not move on after one exposure. He arranges repeated situations that target the same area until you stop explaining it away, stop managing it better, and finally acknowledge that this particular manifestation of self must die. Third comes the crucifixion, the actual death of that specific aspect of natural life, not through your effort to kill it, but through your ceasing to draw life from it. This third phase terrifies people because it feels like losing your identity. Here is a concrete example that Watchman Nee himself provided. A brother had unusual ability to sense spiritual atmospheres in meetings. He could accurately identify when the flesh was operating, when the spirit was moving, when mixture was present. This gift made him valuable to the church. But over time, other believers began deferring to his discernment instead of developing their own spiritual sensitivity. The gift that should have helped others was actually keeping them dependent on his natural ability. God had to break this. How? By allowing this brother to be completely wrong in a high-stakes situation. His discernment failed spectacularly, publicly, in a way that humiliated him and damaged his reputation. The exposure phase revealed that his gift, while genuine, had become a substitute for the body's collective dependence on the head. The persistence phase involved repeated failures until he stopped trusting his ability. The crucifixion phase came when he finally released his identity as the one with discernment and allowed the Spirit to move through anyone God chose. What makes this process so difficult is that you are not dying to something bad. You are dying to something that worked. Your natural wisdom that solved complex problems must die. Your emotional strength that stabilized others must break. Your spiritual perception that guided decisions must fail. Why? Because as long as these natural abilities produce results, you will unconsciously draw from them instead of from Christ. And here is the devastating truth: you cannot tell the difference while the natural life is strong. Your natural wisdom feels like spiritual guidance. Your emotional strength seems like godly stability. Your organizational ability appears as spiritual gift. Only after these are broken can you look back and recognize how much of what you called ministry was actually just you being effective. The reconstitution that follows this breaking is not about God giving you better gifts. It is about Christ Himself becoming your wisdom, your strength, your discernment, your ability. The difference is subtle in description but revolutionary in experience. Before breaking, you pray for wisdom and receive insight that you then apply. After breaking, Christ Himself becomes your wisdom in real time. You know what you could not know. You see what you could not see. You understand what transcends your capacity to understand. This is not improved intuition. This is another living through you, thinking through your renewed mind, perceiving through your awakened spirit, acting through your surrendered will. And this only becomes possible after the natural abilities that could approximate spiritual reality have been systematically terminated. There is a phrase in Watchman Nee's teaching that he used sparingly because it is so easily misunderstood: the mingling of divine life with human life. He was not describing partnership, cooperation, or God helping you. He was pointing to something far more radical: the actual fusion of Christ's life with your reconstituted being, creating a third reality that is neither purely divine nor purely human, but something unprecedented. This is not metaphorical. This is not positional truth about your standing before God. This is actual ontological transformation, where what you are changes at the deepest level. And this is crucial, this mingling cannot occur while your natural life still dominates. Oil and water do not mix. Divine life and natural life do not mingle. First, the natural must be broken down to such a degree that it no longer operates as an independent source. Your worst circumstances are the laboratory where this mingling becomes possible. Every time pressure forces you past the end of your natural resources, every time you face something your strength cannot handle, every time circumstances strip away what you could do in yourself, you reach a critical juncture. Most believers pray for deliverance at this exact moment. They ask God to remove the pressure, restore their abilities, fix the situation. But those who understand reconstitution recognize this moment as the doorway. This is where natural life ends and divine life can begin to flow, not as a substitute that helps you, but as a replacement that becomes you. The mingling happens in these moments when you are too weak to generate your own response, too depleted to draw from your own resources, too broken to trust your own wisdom. Watchman Nee illustrated this with a specific observation about prayer. Before breaking, prayer is primarily asking. You present your needs, and God provides answers. This is real, but it operates at the soul level. Your mind formulates requests. Your emotions motivate the asking. Your will chooses to pray. After breaking, prayer becomes something entirely different. Christ praying through you, interceding through your spirit, groaning through your deepest being with petitions that bypass your understanding. You cannot produce this kind of prayer. You cannot learn techniques that achieve it. It only emerges from a spirit that has been released from the domination of soul and flesh, and that release requires the systematic breaking of every natural structure that kept the spirit locked inside. The practical manifestation of this mingling appears in what Watchman Nee called the spontaneous operation of the spirit. Before reconstitution, you sense God's leading and then choose whether to obey. There is a gap between perception and action, a space where your will evaluates and decides. After reconstitution, the spirit moves and you move simultaneously, not because you chose to obey, but because his life has become your life at such a fundamental level that there is no longer a meaningful distinction between his will and yours. This is not the death of your personality. It is the liberation of your true self, the person you were always meant to be before sin, and the fall distorted human nature into something self-referential and autonomous. Here is where your specific worst circumstance reveals its unique design. God is not applying generic pressure hoping something breaks. He is targeting the precise configuration of your natural life, your exact blend of strengths, gifts, wounds, and coping mechanisms, with circumstances calculated to dismantle your specific structure. The betrayal you experienced was not random. It targeted your particular trust in human relationships. The failure you encountered was not accidental. It exposed your unique dependence on competence. The loss you suffered was not arbitrary. It revealed where you drew life from something created rather than from the Creator. Each worst circumstance is a custom-designed tool for breaking your specific manifestation of natural life, so that Christ's life can mingle with the reconstituted you that emerges. Watchman Nee identified a phenomenon that explains why some believers suffer extensively yet remain unchanged. They experience pressure without accepting the verdict. The pressure exposes the natural life, reveals its bankruptcy, demonstrates its inability to handle spiritual reality, but the believer refuses to agree with God's assessment. Instead, they interpret the circumstance as testing their faith, building their patience, or refining their character. These interpretations are not wrong, but they are dangerously incomplete. They allow you to endure suffering without letting that suffering accomplish its intended purpose, the execution of the specific aspect of natural life that God is targeting. Accepting the verdict means looking at the exposed area and saying, "This must die, not improve, not be managed, not be consecrated. This expression of my natural life must be terminated." The technical distinction Watchman Nee drew between the soul and the spirit becomes critical here. Your soul, mind, emotions, will is not evil. It is natural. It was designed to be the servant, not the master. Before the fall, human beings lived from the spirit, which was united with God, and the soul functioned as the instrument through which spiritual reality was expressed. After the fall, this order reversed. The soul took dominance, the spirit was deadened, and human life became self-originated rather than God-originated. Regeneration restores your spirit to life and reconnects it with God. But regeneration does not automatically restore the proper order. Your soul, which has functioned as master for your entire natural life, does not voluntarily step down. It must be forcibly displaced through a process so thorough that Watchman Nee compared it to chemical decomposition. Your worst circumstance is God applying heat and pressure until decomposition occurs in a specific area. Consider an example, a leader whose identity was completely wrapped up in being needed. Her entire ministry expression flowed from this deep need to be essential to others. She counseled people brilliantly, solved their problems effectively, and created genuine dependency. Then God systematically removed her from every position where people needed her. One by one, the relationships that fed her sense of purpose ended. Not because she failed, not because she sinned, but because as long as being needed was the source of her ministerial energy, her natural life was still the origin of her service. The decomposition was brutal. She felt purposeless, worthless, unnecessary. This was not depression to be treated. This was death to be embraced. The specific soul function that derived identity from being needed had to decompose completely before the spirit could express Christ's ministry through her in purity. The replacement that follows decomposition is what Watchman Nee called the spirit taking ascendancy over the soul. This does not mean the soul disappears or becomes passive. It means the spirit becomes the source and the soul becomes the instrument. Before breaking, her mind generated counseling wisdom, her emotions created empathy, her will chose to help people, all soul functions producing real ministry results. After breaking, Christ's wisdom flowed through her renewed mind, his compassion moved through her sanctified emotions, his will expressed through her surrendered will, spirit originating what the soul then faithfully expressed. The ministry looked similar externally, but the source was entirely different. And only she could tell the difference, because only she knew the internal shift from self-generated service to Christ-originated overflow. Here is the pattern that repeats across every area of life: exposure, persistence, verdict, decomposition, replacement. God exposes where natural life dominates. He persists with pressure on that specific area. You accept the verdict that this must die. The decomposition occurs through sustained circumstances that remove your ability to draw life from that source. Then replacement happens. Christ becomes that thing in you, not gives you that thing, not helps you with that thing, becomes that thing. Your worst circumstance is the sustained pressure phase, and most believers waste it by praying for it to end instead of surrendering to what it is designed to kill. The circumstance will persist until the decomposition is complete, or until you become so skilled at managing the pressure that God must escalate to break through your increasingly sophisticated defenses. The final stage of reconstitution that Watchman Nee described involves what he termed the corporate expression. Individual breaking is necessary but insufficient. God is not merely creating individual believers who can express Christ in isolation. He is reconstituting human beings who can function as living stones in a spiritual house, members in a body, where Christ is expressed through the coordinated function of many broken vessels. This is why your breaking often involves betrayal, misunderstanding, or conflict with other believers. It is not random relational difficulty. It is God exposing the specific ways your natural life cannot function in genuine spiritual community. Your independence must be broken. Your self-sufficiency must be shattered. Your ability to minister alone must fail. Not because community is a value, but because Christ cannot be fully expressed through any single individual. Watchman Nee observed that believers who successfully maintain their natural life intact, despite years of pressure, share a common pattern. They avoid deep spiritual relationships. They serve, they attend meetings, they appear committed, but they structure their life to prevent anyone from truly knowing them or having authority to speak into their deepest areas. This avoidance is not conscious hypocrisy. It is self-preservation. Deep relationships with other broken believers create constant exposure of areas where natural life still dominates. Your reactions to their weaknesses, your responses to their input, your feelings when they are promoted while you are overlooked, your judgments about their methods, all of this reveals which life is operating. And if you allow these relationships to exist authentically, they become God's most effective tool for sustained breaking, because unlike circumstances which eventually end, spiritual relationships create continuous opportunities for the natural life to be exposed and dealt with. The reconstitution that emerges from corporate breaking produces something Watchman Nee saw rarely: believers who can genuinely function from the Spirit in coordination with others. They do not compete for recognition because the self-life that needs recognition is dead. They do not protect their territory because the natural life that requires control has been terminated. They do not need to be the source of ministry because the ego that demanded centrality has been executed. What remains is pure function, each broken vessel releasing whatever measure of Christ they carry, all streams flowing together, creating an expression of Christ that no individual could produce. This is not teamwork. This is not cooperation. This is organic unity, where the same life flows through multiple members, producing coordinated expression without coordination meetings. Your specific worst circumstance may be preparing you for a function in the body that you cannot yet see. The betrayal that is killing your need for loyalty, the obscurity that is terminating your demand for recognition, the weakness that is executing your independence, the confusion that is ending your confidence in your own understanding. Each aspect of your natural life that God is targeting corresponds to a specific expression of Christ that He intends to release through you in coordination with others. But that expression can never flow while the natural life occupies that space. The breaking must be thorough, the death must be complete, the decomposition must reach the foundation, not to destroy you but to empty you enough that what fills the space is pure Christ rather than a mixture of you and Him. The ultimate reconstitution Watchman Nee pointed to is this: you cease being a Christian trying to live for Christ and become a vessel through whom Christ lives Himself. Not helps you live, not empowers you to live, lives Himself. Your personality remains. In fact, it becomes more authentically you than it ever was when controlled by natural life. Your mind continues functioning, but now it is Christ's mind thinking through your renewed mind. Your emotions still operate, but now they express His emotions through your sanctified emotions. Your will keeps choosing, but now His will is your will at such a fundamental level that obedience is not duty but nature. This is not mysticism. This is not losing yourself in God. This is becoming finally the person you were created to be before sin ever distorted human nature into autonomy. And your worst circumstance, the one you have been resenting, avoiding, praying against, is the precise tool God is using to dismantle everything that keeps this reality from becoming your daily experience. The prison cell that held Watchman Nee for 20 years never broke him. It revealed him. Every comfort stripped away, every natural ability rendered useless, every plan reduced to ashes. And in that complete dismantling, something emerged that no amount of successful ministry could have produced. A man so thoroughly emptied of himself that Christ could live through him without mixture, without obstruction, without the constant interference of natural life, masquerading as spiritual service. This is the destination your worst circumstance is taking you toward, not to a better version of the life you're desperately trying to save, but to a completely different existence where you finally stop being a Christian trying to live for God and become a vessel through whom God lives Himself. The pressure you feel right now isn't destroying your future. It's dismantling the false foundation you built it on so something eternal can emerge. And when you look back from the other side of this breaking, you won't ask why God allowed it. You'll wonder why He loved you enough to refuse to leave you trapped in a life that looked successful but kept you from experiencing what you were actually created for. So here's the question that matters. Will you keep fighting to preserve what God is trying to kill, or will you finally let go and discover what happens when the natural life stops and divine life begins? If something in this message cut through your defenses and exposed an area where you're still holding on, if you felt that uncomfortable recognition of which life is actually operating in you, don't let this moment pass without marking it. Drop a comment below and tell me which specific aspect of your natural life God is targeting right now. Not a vague spiritual answer, but the actual thing, the identity He's dismantling, the strength He's removing, the circumstance that's breaking you. When you name it, something shifts. And if this helped you see your worst circumstance in a completely different light, share it with someone else who's in their breaking season. They need to hear that what feels like destruction is actually reconstitution. Subscribe if you want more content that goes this deep into what God is really doing when everything falls apart. And if you want to go even deeper, if you're hungry for teachings that don't just scratch the surface, but dig into the uncomfortable truths most channels avoid, consider becoming a channel member. You'll get access to exclusive content that explores these themes with even more depth and specificity. Your support through membership or any donation, no matter the size, allows us to keep creating content that challenges comfortable Christianity and points toward authentic spiritual transformation. This isn't just about supporting a channel, it's about investing in a community that refuses to settle for religious performance when radical transformation is available.